Hi all! So for this video, we're going to be talking about evaluating with negative integers. Make sure you've got your notes and pencil and everything ready to go. You can pause whatever you need to. One thing I do want to point out before we get started is that the homework for today is from 3 different sections, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. That's the one where the presentation is, which hopefully you've already gotten your planner from the weekly calendar. Now, remember, I don't expect every student to do every single problem on the homework, but I do recommend that you do at least a few from each of these, spread out over your 15 to 20 minutes that you're doing homework for this class. Let's begin. So the first thing we want to do when we're talking about evaluating with negative integers is make sure that we all know what an integer is. And in order to define integer, we're going to start by defining a whole number. Now, whole numbers are the ones that look like 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And the definition is a non-negative number that doesn't need to be written as a fraction. So as we go on in this class, one thing you'll start noticing is I'll use like the symbol for number, I'll start using symbols for negative, stuff like that. Now if these are the whole numbers, the integers are the numbers, all the way down, -2, -1, 0, and then 1, 2, all the way up. So what we define these as is the whole numbers and their opposites. So the opposites are the negative, and then we've got our whole numbers. Now, we're going to start by adding and subtracting with these. So one of these problems might be something like -17 plus 9 plus -23. Now, the first thing that I'm going to want you to do with these problems is whenever you have two signs next to each other, sign we mean just positive or negative. Sign, again, means just positive or negative. If we have two next to each other with just a parentheses or without anything in between them, we want to simplify that. So that's the first thing we're going to do. All right, so we're going to simplify, and in this case we have one positive and one negative, which we would then simplify to a negative. So this is going to follow the same rules as if we were multiplying or dividing. So in this case, in number 2, if we look down here, we have two negatives together, like that. That's going to turn into a positive. So when we simplify number 1, we end up with -17 plus 9 minus 23. Now, we're just going to go left to right now. We're going to start by adding -17 plus 9. And here, their signs are different. One's negative and one's positive. And an easy way to remember that is if their signs are different, find their difference. So find the difference between the two numbers. Now, the difference between 17 and 9 is 8, and it's going to be negative because the negative on the 17 is the larger number. So -17 plus 9 is -8. Now we have still the minus 23 to go. -8 minus 23, the signs are the same. They're both negative, so we're going to find their sum. 8 and 23 together is 31, and it's going to stay negative. We've boxed our final answer, -31. Now for number 2, we can simplify the signs here as well. We've got -4 minus a negative, so that becomes plus 29, and then plus another negative, so that's going to, like we saw in the problem above, become minus 11. And again, we're going to work left to right, starting with -4 plus 29. That's the same, if it helps you sometimes to reorder, that's the same as 29 minus 4, because the 4 is the negative and the 29 is positive. -4 plus 29 is positive 25. We still have minus 11, and that ends up being positive 14. Again, box our final answer. So that's with addition and subtraction. Let's look at multiplication and division. So as we've talked about before, there's some rules for multiplication and division. When we have two negatives like this multiplied together, that's going to turn into a positive. So again, we've got our shorthand multiplication, and that's an ampersand, that's the symbol. Division, two negatives equal a positive, and one of each, a positive and a negative, equals a negative. So in the case of number 3, negative 10 times negative 12 is positive 120. So we're going to multiply the numbers just the same, divided by 15. Now you can use a long division problem, anything like that. Since I've written it as a fraction, I think it's easier to just divide both the top and the bottom by a common factor. You could divide it by 5 or by 3, both work. I'm going to choose to divide them both by 3 to simplify the fraction. As long as you do to both sides, that's fine. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, so 120 divided by 3 is 40 over 5 for 15 divided by 3. And that is a number that's a little bit easier to do the division in our head. 40 divided by 5 is 8. And since they're both positive, we can just carry it on like that. Now here we've got some more problems, and you'll notice here we've got a variable that's equal to a negative integer. These are called substitution problems. And this means that we need to replace the variable with a number and then simplify or evaluate as far as we can. Now something that's really important when you're substituting with a negative number, like we're going to be here, is making sure you include the negative when you plug it in. So for example here, I'm going to say negative 4 parentheses times 2 times negative 2 minus 7. And this is about showing your work as well. We're not going to skip steps in our head. Now we're just going to follow our order of operations, PEMDAS, which means we're going to do the parentheses first and the multiplication inside the parentheses before the subtraction. So this is then, I'm going to keep the negative 4 here. This negative 4 is the same as that negative 4. Parentheses, negative 4 minus 7. If you recall, if we find the same sign, they're both negative, we find their sum. So this is negative 4 times negative 11. Two negatives together is positive 44 when we multiply. So one thing you'll notice here is that the operations have slightly different rules. We have two negatives when we're subtracting. We have a negative as the answer. When we multiply, the negatives cancel out. So make sure that you're applying the correct rule to the correct operation. For part B, it's even more important that we include that negative sign here, because then we end up with, in the numerator, 3 plus 2 minus negative 2. Because there's a subtraction in the problem, so this subtraction sign is this symbol, and then we have the negative 2 in the y. So we have two subtraction signs there, which then become a plus as we simplify them. So then we have 3 plus 2 plus 2, which is then 7 over negative 14. The negative, positive, and a negative in a division problem is a negative final answer. 7 over 14, we then simplify, dividing both sides by 7, and we get negative 1/2 as our final answer. If you're stuck on any of these problems, please make sure to reserve a tutoring slot. Wednesday's a great time to do that. If you're watching these in order, that means you could get help tomorrow. Have a great day. I'll talk to you later.